Gary Heine and I teamed up back in 1994 to open our first Heine Brothers coffee store. I was almost 30, Gary was almost 40. We were ready to do something that fed our souls as well as our bank accounts. And so we spent a lot of time talking about what would this business be like? You know, how can we set up a business that does our part to not only give back, but to take care of?
I saw the problems of the world as being huge, and I didn't really know how I could make a difference at all. But then when we started selling fair trade organic coffee that was changing people's lives around the world in the coffee growing countries, I realized that by making a choice every day in my life to drink fair trade organic coffee, I was changing the world. Drinking one cup of coffee, this was changing the world. We were visiting the coffee growing countries and we were seeing what a profound effect that paying fair trade prices had on these communities. They were building schools, they were building water systems. We were very excited about that. But then we started to think, well, what about Louisville, Kentucky? This is where our stores are. What about poor people here, people here that aren't getting enough food to eat? What can we do for them? By that time, we had 5 stores and we were producing 50, 60 tons of coffee grounds a year.
What if this waste product were a resource? And it sounds like something that some scriptwriter made up, but that was Gary's mantra. What if this waste product were a resource?
I was experimenting with worm composting at the time, so I started feeding the worms coffee grounds to see if they would eat it. And they ate it, but ate it slow, so I started adding fruit and vegetable waste from Paul's Fruit Market, started mixing it together, and they started eating it faster, and we started producing worm compost that we started using in the plants at all of our stores.
He envisioned big things, not just not throwing the coffee grounds into the landfill, but it was going to be a source of compost that was going to be used to create an urban farm. And from the very beginnings, he was talking about an urban farm. That was the beginnings of breaking new grounds.
One day, Gary came to me and started sharing this idea about vermicomposting using coffee grounds. And it was not anything that I knew about particularly, but it sounded interesting. With that, Gary and I started working on it.
Steve suggested the way to create this organization would be to share the story with other people and get other people inspired and empower them to help take on the vision, because that's the only way you're going to get it done. It's a big, big vision, and it's a vision that creates community, and it creates transformation across neighborhoods, so you need a lot of people involved. So that's what I started doing, is sharing the vision with people all across the community.
Everybody talks about green stuff. Everybody talks about reducing your personal footprint and making a difference. This went beyond that. This was breaking new grounds.
It was almost like a punchline for me. It was like, and then the poor people who live around our area can grow their own food. I think my jaw hit the floor. I thought, I want to see where this goes.
We were composting very small amounts. We needed to find a model to compost large amounts and to create food from that compost.
In the course of his research, Gary had discovered this organization in Milwaukee called Growing Power that is headed by a man named Will Allen.
They were having a training where they teach you about composting and worm composting, growing food in the city, growing food indoors. So we went to Milwaukee in March of 2006, and it blew our minds. Growing Power is located in a poor section of Milwaukee. They had these 2 acres, and they had a huge pile of compost, and they had 7 or 8 greenhouses and hoop houses where they're growing massive amounts of sprouts and greens and vegetables, which they were selling. They had huge fish tanks built into the ground where they were growing fish.
It's not about how great a farmer I am or whatever, it's about how good of a composter I am. That's what it's about, the soil. It's totally about the soil.
Will Allen is 6'7", 320 pounds, and he's solid muscle. But he speaks so beautifully about his vision of urban agriculture and people being empowered by growing their own food.
When I first met Gary Heine at that first workshop, I noticed that he was asking a lot of questions, writing down everything, and really just documenting everything we were doing. And that kind of made me happy, because not all participants do that. So we kind of connected from the standpoint of his passion that he was showing.
Going to Milwaukee transformed us. We saw that our vision was possible, and here was somebody who was doing it.
He said, we're going to go back and try to do some of the stuff you're doing here. But everybody says that, and like I always tell people, talk is cheap. Show me something. So, well, I guess Gary really showed me.
When we got back to Louisville, we created our first compost bin. We put it in the side yard at the roastery. Brian Barnes brought fruit and vegetable waste from Wild Oats.
We would keep the trash in the freezer at work. So I would take the frozen trash and put it in my car and drive it over to the site, every couple of weeks. My car always smelled of trash. And it wasn't a lot of trash, it was 3 or 4 bags, but as it started to grow especially, it's a hatchback, what are you gonna do?